I'm here with Andrew Johnson, one of my good friends in life, in church, I've learned professionally from you. We've known each other for a couple of years. Andrew, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us about who you are, and let us get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. First of all, this is certainly a pleasure to be here. We've been we've been friends for 6 years, probably.
So long.
But I've been learning from you too. I've had multiple times where we've sat down and said, Rob, I don't understand this. Can you explain how this thing in business works? And you've been a huge influence on me as well. So Andrew Johnson is my name. I have been with Chick-Fil-A as an owner-operator for 13 years, I think, and with the company for about 16 years. I own the Burnsville, Minnesota Chick-fil-A restaurant. So I'm a dad with 5 kids, been married to my wife for about 18 years now. And that's a little bit about who I am.
And I love it. And that's part of why I wanted to have you on here. I think it's always, as an entrepreneur and as a business owner, I get super curious about the caliber of what you got going on at Chick-fil-A. And I think that's super interesting. And then both of us are followers of Jesus.
Yep.
And both of us have families. I always joke, I've got 2 friends that are Johnsons. Both of you have more kids than I do, and I have 4.
Is that right?
Yeah, they have. So when we had 3, and I told him we were going to have the 4th, I told him, he's like, no way. Well, actually, we are too. And then 2 weeks later, he's like, oh, by the way, we're having twins. And I'm like, so it's like God had that happen to me just to make sure that I had some perspective. And and that was one family that I'm always like, well, I can't be too complaining here because those guys got a heart. No. And then you guys are always busting tail more than I am. And so what are the spreads of your kids? Tell us a little bit about what you got there.
Yeah, they're from 13. So AJ's our 13-year-old down to 5. Sweet, wild Evelyn is our 5-year-old.
And okay, so I wanted to interview you because of a number of things. So in this, we're going to do a long conversation. We're going to cut this up into some shorter things. So if you like this, we want to interview more entrepreneurs. So folks, if you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe. We always unbox entrepreneurship, business, leadership, financial, marketing, how to start and grow a business. So we're going to do a little bit of that. So those of you that are thinking of that, we're going to have a little bit of leadership stuff. And then connecting it to faith. And those of you that think that faith is just silly, we're gonna totally what we want to do is share how God has impacted our life. And so there'll be a couple of different shorts that we have on here, but we'll also have it on the podcast too, so at Apple and Google. Tell us your story, because this is so you plop down $1 million. Help people understand, how does one become a franchise owner of a Chick-fil-A?
Yeah, good question. This might be where you start hearing some of the faith element come out too, which, by the way, you don't have to be a Christian to work at Chick-fil-A, to own a Chick-fil-A restaurant, but it is part of my personal story, and so you might hear a little bit of that come out, and I hope that's okay as part of our talk today. So, yes, typically a franchise fee with, in the restaurant business, especially the fast food business, is going to be $1 million plus. In Chick-fil-A, it's very different. So it's a $10,000 franchise fee. The difference here is there's no assets that I own in the business. I'm not building equity on anything. Chick-fil-A owns the property. They own the building. They own the equipment. And so none of that stuff is mine. Mm-hmm. I own the business. I've got my own LLC. My employees work technically for me. They don't work for Chick-fil-A. Mm-hmm. Though, I mean, you tell everybody you work for Chick-fil-A or at Chick-fil-A, but, technically speaking, they work under the umbrella of my LLC. So how do you become a Chick-fil-A franchise owner? And by the way, you might hear me say operator, you might hear me say owner, you might hear me say owner-operator. That's all sort of interchangeable language in our world. But so it's very competitive. That's the trick here. So most people can figure out how to come up with $10,000, but not everybody can become a Chick-fil-A operator.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, like, this is a loose figure. I don't know if this is exactly the number, but From what I heard, there were 75,000 people or so that applied to be a Chick-fil-A operator this last year.
And how many stores are there at a Chick-fil-A generally right now?
There's like about 2,500, somewhere in that range. But we're talking about maybe 150 positions that are available a year from new restaurant openings or pretty small turnover within the Chick-fil-A operator community.
Now, in a way, I think that's a lot like NBA tryouts. I think that's a lot like sports competitions, because when you get into entrepreneurship and business ownership, you start to realize that it is like performing as an athlete. Now it's a team, and there's so much that goes into it. In a way, I always use the analogy of a tractor to a degree. You got this team, and it's like an excavator. Somebody, you got a team that's the scoop, you got the hydraulics, you've got the operator, the tracks, and everything comes together to accomplish some sort of work, right? Yep. And there's different types. You get the little ring, or it could be boats, right? That was another analogy. You've got little folks that are in their canoe. It's a small operation. It's not big at all. And that's fine. And then you got some that are gigantic and some in the middle. And I think that what people don't always appreciate is the intense difficulty, I think, from what I've learned in running a restaurant. I worked for 2 years at a Perkins. Yeah. And then I worked 7 years at Best Buy, and watching what it takes to keep a restaurant going, let alone profitable, let alone growing in profits, is significant. Yep. So I'll tell you, folks, Andrew's kind of the Kobe Bryant in a way. Like I'll say that. You won't say that, but continue to talk about the culture and the abilities and the process, because it was really like hey, let's see what you got. And you moved around a bit. Keep telling your story here. Yeah, absolutely. And I am not one of the best Chick-fil-A operators out there. Andrew's humble. I'll brag on him. You've been to my restaurant. You experience it. Like, I hope it's usually pretty good. No, it is genuinely. And I would tell you the second it was not. It's it's on time. It's hot. The food's done properly. Yep. Well, thank you. Yep. Thank you. There are some things, and we can maybe talk about this later. There's some things that I do well. There are lots of things that I don't, and I'm still learning and growing in those things. But you want me to go back to the story? Yeah, keep the story going. Okay, so my wife Jennifer and I were married in 2005. Mm-hmm. In a very short season of time, we graduated from college, we got married, and we moved to the Atlanta area. And we did that because Jennifer got an offer to be a elementary school teacher at a school in Gwinnett County, Georgia, which is on the northeast side of Atlanta. But you're from Minnesota. From Minnesota, and you go out to Atlanta, hot Atlanta. That's right. That's where we went. People sometimes assume the story is like, well, you went there for Chick-fil-A. I didn't even know what Chick-fil-A was when we first got to Atlanta, but I was invited by a friend to go eat there one day, and I was pretty impressed. I really liked the food, and the service was really good, and that just sort of stuck with me, and I became a more frequent customer over that first year that we lived there. But I didn't work there right away. I actually worked as a high school English teacher my first year. Did you know that about me? No, I did not know that. That's a part of my past that I would rather forget, actually. It was... correcting papers and keeping... Oh, it was terrible. You're a good teacher, though. Both of us teach. Andrew Andrew teaches the elementary-aged large group at our church, which is no small feat. Yeah. You got a couple of people there, groups of 20 to 100 type of deal. Give me a microphone and I can get up and just kind of talk in front of people, but actually being planful about it and having, following the script for the whole school year is like, that's not, it didn't work very well. So you're following your beautiful wife. Yep. You get sucked into being a teacher, and then you're finding yourself eating Chick-fil-A, and you're like, okay, all right. Yeah, So next part of the story is I was actually, I knew I wasn't going to be a teacher after the first school year. And I was in serious talks with the church that we were going to about being a pastor. Mm-hmm. They had a formal pastoral internship that I was pretty sure I was going to get into. And I was pretty sure I was going to be a pastor. My dad was a pastor growing up. And so I thought this might be a really, really natural fit. And so I was all ready to sign on, make it happen. And they said, hey, have we told you that this pays $300 a month? Wait a minute. You thought you were going into a full job? Yeah, this was like everything. A real legit paid internship. And no. Oh, yeah. That's fun. They weren't trying to be sneaky about it. We just hadn't had that conversation. And so, boom, it hits me. I go, okay. Be paid in bagels? Yeah, seriously. I know. $300 a month. And there's oh, my gosh. Yeah, free water from the water cooler, but there's...
Yeah.
Man.
I'm thinking, okay, well, if I'm really going to do this internship, it's going to be mostly daytime work, but I'm going to have to get a full-time job. Where can I go work at nighttime? Maybe Chick-fil-A. Seems like a pretty cool place to work. And so I started walking into a number of different Chick-fil-A's. And I'd say, hey, do you have any positions available? Some would be like, yeah, I mean, maybe, you know, they
heard your accent. They're like, we don't want anything to do with this northern boy.
Yeah, this Yankee coming in.
He can't make any chicken.
Exactly. Yeah, he doesn't know how to be nice to anybody. And so I walked into one particular Chick-fil-A one day, Chick-fil-A at Sugarloaf and Satellite, and operator Brad Williams was the guy there. And when I walked up to the counter, I still remember I asked the cashier, do you guys have any jobs available? And she turns around and there's Brad right there. And she goes, hey, Brad, can you help this guy? And Brad, he looks at me, he goes, you want to just sit down and talk for a little bit? And so he does this on the spot interview with me. But he does most of the talking. He starts telling me all about how I can own my own Chick-fil-A restaurant.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
So you just spitting the culture right away.
He was, yes. And I'm not trying to talk, too big about myself, but I think he saw something in me pretty early. I mean, very early on in that first conversation. And he starts kind of telling me how I can go own my own restaurant one day, and Chick-fil-A will maybe be in Minnesota at some point. And so he's casting this vision for me. I didn't really buy into it right away. It's like, well, I'm going to be a pastor, but this seems like a cool place to work. And so I got hired as a team member, and I started working on the front counter with the idea of 2 months from now, this church internship is going to start. Well, when we got 2 months down the road, I realized how much respect I had for Brad in the role that he was doing. I saw the kind of influence he had on his team. He had an influence on the community as a whole. He still had time with his family, which was pretty amazing. And then he told me the average income, too, that a Chick-fil-A franchise owner would make. And I was like, this sounds too good to be true.
It's that good Chick-fil-A sauce.
Yeah,
real
that's
sauce.
right. That's right. And I told him, I want to be an operator. Can you help me do this?
Wow.
Yeah.
So how long had you been at the restaurant when you started talking like that?
About 2 months.
Seriously?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
I like it.
And that was it. And it was perfect timing. I mean, I think God had just kind of laid all this out. Brad was opening a second Chick-fil-A restaurant, which is pretty hard to do. You got to go through an interview process, and it's very selective. But Brad was a great operator, and he was selected for a second location. He needed more leaders on his team, and so I think he was probably excited when I told him that I was interested.
That's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So he opens this new thing, and this is like, you get to kind of...
I was one of the main managers. Yeah, there was a guy named Landon who was the general manager, and then there was me. It was like the two of us that were trying to run this new restaurant, and I learned so much working for Brad. I mean, he's developed dozens of operators out of his restaurant. I mean, he's never been a guy to just kind of hold on and grasp it all for himself. He has always been generous and giving of his time and his energy and his wisdom and his finances. He is an incredible leader. How
old of a guy was he when you were interacting with him?
Probably about as old as I am now. I mean, he was probably in his late 30s. Okay. Yeah, something like that. But yeah, I spent 3.5 years working for him, and it was mostly, all right, Andrew, like, here's the keys. You got the car. You drive it. And he allowed me to make lots of mistakes and screw a lot of things up on his dime. And
what are some examples of stuff you can remember that you just, like, mistakes you made?
Oh, my gosh. So I had a hard time being able to communicate value to people early on. Now, this isn't kind of a one-off story. This is just learnings that I had over time. I couldn't always follow through on my word. And so you think about, like, in the middle of a lunch rush, that was part of my job. It's like, I got to manage this lunch rush and everything that's going on in the midst of it. Somebody would go, hey, Andrew, we need more sweet tea. And I go, okay, I'll get that for you in just a minute. And then it gets busier, and then you don't go get it. And I just sort of became known as the guy who didn't really follow through on his word very well. And we had a conversation one day, actually. It was me and Brad and two of his leaders, because there was some tension going on. There were some dynamics that just needed to get out on the table. And I remember one of the leaders looked at me and she said, Andrew, nobody around here likes you. And so she had some growing to do, I think, in the way that she communicated this, right? I actually remember Brad saying, okay, we don't speak in absolutes like that. I'm sure there's somebody who likes Andrew at the restaurant, right? But what she was really saying is like, you don't follow through on your word. When you tell us you're going to do something, you don't always do it. And we have a hard time trusting you. And that was a really hard lesson to learn.
Interesting. So how did you overcome that? Like, what are some things you've had to do to overcome those? Because it sounded like you're giving some small, in the moment, tactical thing. I'm sure there's some bigger things. But
yeah. Some of it's really practical. Like take the sweet tea example. It's not always that I just say I'm going to do it and then realize I can't. Like, honestly, like. I just don't remember some of the small details kind of often. And so I keep a lot of notes in my iPad. I use the Notability app, and I've got every conversation that I have, at least when I'm sitting down at a table with somebody, like I'm jotting notes down, and I'm making sure that next time we come back and sit down, that I go over those notes before we have a conversation, so I remember the critical points and the things that I need to bring up in the conversation. And then if I forget about the sweet tea, like that can be forgiven. That's not that big of a deal. But if you tell me something that you're struggling with on the job, or you're telling me that you want to move up and you want a promotion, and I just sort of forget about it and don't ever bring it up again, like that's a problem. That's not valuing people very well.
Big things like that are difficult. It's always interesting. I have a tendency to think very far in the future, very big in the picture, and the result of that is I can easily drop the details or whatever.
Yeah, so you and I are the same way, I think, in that.
And it's also interesting too, is because the ability to do that, they don't always. They're usually separate, right?
Yeah.
People that are good at one are usually not as good at the other.
That's absolutely right.
And vice versa. It's always funny. I work with these accountants, and I'm like, would you get out of the weeds for crying out loud and one level up? But that's cool to know that just the note taking. For me, it's been like I've had to use a calendar. And that's a great challenge as a web design and marketing company, is we have 50 to 60 customers a year that are like talking to us, and there's a lot of little screwing around things that we have to do, and then a gigantic checklist of did you put the conversion event into Google Analytics on the third page? And I'm like, and my challenge has always been is like I kind of know instinctually a lot of that little stuff I know I got to do. And then me getting it out so that this team can do it around me is the great challenge. So then I'm like, I'm not that organized anyways. Now I have to get organized and make an organized checklist. For organized people that are going to know exactly how little I know how to organize this stuff, I'm like, I'm so laid before these folks of my inability to do this. But
right.
That's cool to hear. Okay, so you get a little bit of feedback. Kind of take a little bit on the chin, but you grow with it. And that was a failure that you pushed through. So you're there for 3 months. You have this conversation. You start. How long were you at this other Chick-fil-A that was opening?
So like I said, Brad had 2 restaurants, and I moved back and forth between them over about 3.5 years. So that was the tenure that I had with Brad.
Okay. How long again? Say it one more time.
3.5.
3.5 years. Okay, so 3.5 years. And then all of a sudden, Truett Cathy shows up and is he like rolling on dubs like a big old does he got a low rider with chicken and
I always thought it must have been really weird for Truett by the time that I came around, like my generation. Truett was a celebrity in his own company.
I bet.
Like we'd see him at the office it was in Atlanta, so it wasn't that far from the restaurant I worked at, so occasionally we'd be at the home office. We call it the support center now, and we'd go, oh man, we got to go talk to Truett, like we can get his autograph.
It's weird. I was at Best Buy. We used to see the CEO and stuff. And you're like, oh, that's the guy that you see on all of ours. Like it is weird. You get enamored by it.
I know.
But
I know.
Okay, keep going.
So anyway, Truett was well out of the selection conversation by the time that I came along.
So he didn't show up.
Sorry, he did not. Oh, Siri, I'm not gonna say that again. So yeah, he had nothing to do with it, though. I did get a chance to meet him a few times, which was really pretty cool, actually. So Brad, like I said, he's turned out dozens of Chick-fil-A operators through the years. And so he has a reputation. He knows the people in the company to talk to. And so I just periodically started setting up some meetings with some strategic people, some of the right people at the support center. And I'd say, hey, if I can, if I make the 45-minute drive to the office, would you just take 30 minutes and sit down with me? And so
just in a learning environment, hey, will you teach me, hear me, feedback type of deal?
Yeah, there was that, but there was also, I wanted to make sure that they knew my ambition too, that I want to be a Chick-fil-A operator. And so, yeah, is there anything that I can do, anything that is there even a way that you can help me with that? And so I wasn't shy about asking those questions. So I got to see if I can get the timing right on this, because it's a pretty amazing part of the story. So Brad and I had talked about me going into what we call the interim manager program back then. And I was going to apply to be in the program starting July 2009. Now, an interim manager is basically what the title says it is. You manage a Chick-fil-A in the interim between operators. Okay. So if an operator is selected and moves on to another
You're the
location,
substitute teacher.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. For a season of time, and it serves two purposes. One, there's a leader there in the restaurant, right? So it's good for Chick-fil-A. But two, it's actually a proving ground for someone like me to show, I know how to run a restaurant. I can make this happen. And so they've got this select group of interim managers. It's now called the Leadership Development Program in Chick-fil-A. But they had this select group of people who would be managing Chick-fil-A restaurants in the interim. And so I was going to get into that training and then, go through it, pass through that, and then become an interim manager in July of 2009. Well, that's when Jennifer got pregnant. And she was due in October of 2009. And so I thought, I don't know if we want to, this is our first kid coming along. I don't know if we want to do the interim manager program when we have such a young infant at home, because the interim manager program requires travel. Like, it's 100% travel, essentially. Okay. They might say, hey, there's a location that doesn't have an operator in Tupelo, Mississippi. You want to go do that? Or there's one in Seattle, Washington, or there's one in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And you go where they send you. Okay. Sometimes you're there for 6 months, but it's more likely you're going to be there for 2 months maybe. And you're just going from place to place to place. And do I really want to do this when I've got like a 2-month-old at home? And so we decided, let's just I don't know, get things a little more stable. Maybe when we have a 6-month-old or 8-month-old, 9-month-old, whatever the age was going to be, then let's do the interim manager program. And so I targeted doing January of 2010. That training class was already on the calendar. I was going to apply for that and see if I could get into it. Okay. Well, that spring of 2009, when we found out Jennifer was pregnant, I actually went to the support center, and I met with a guy named Bruce Cameron. Now, Bruce was overseeing the Chick-fil-A expansion into Chicago, and there had never been Chick-fil-A in Chicago up to this point. There had never been Chick-fil-A really north of Indiana at this point. And so I went and sat down with Bruce, and I told him fairly boldly, I said, I want to be an operator in Chicago. How can you help me do that?
That is cool.
It was really cool. And Bruce was so gracious, but he essentially said, you're not ready to be an operator, but I need grand opening supervisors. So I need people with Chick-fil-A experience that can come in and help operators for the first 9 weeks of the restaurant, like 6 weeks before the restaurant opens and 3 weeks after the restaurant opens, just being a support there for their team, have a team of trainers that you're in charge of them, and just making sure the restaurant gets up off the ground and is doing well. And so I said, great, I'd love to do that. That sounds amazing. And we were looking at, it was about a year later, so it was going to be like April 2010, May 2010, something like that, the first Chick-fil-A's in Chicago were going to open. Bruce said, there's one caveat. I want you to get some interim manager experience before you come and do this grand opening supervisor thing. I want you to get a year of experience doing that. So I said, well, I can, but that means I'm going to have to do this July 2009 interim manager class. Are you following all these dates? I know it's getting a little convoluted. No. So I went and talked to Brad, and I said, Brad, I know we talked about me being in the January 2010 class, but Bruce wants me to be in the July 2009 class. Are you okay with that? And Brad goes, absolutely. He gave me his blessing. He wanted what was best for me. And so I jumped into this class, and I was all ready to do it. And in the midst of the class, I get approached by a guy that's in franchise selection. And he says, hey, I might have an opportunity for you. I said, that's awesome. Like, I'd love an interim manager opportunity. He goes, no, like an operator opportunity. And I said, seriously? Like, you want me to be an operator? I've never even had interim manager experience. And he goes, yeah, I think you might be the right guy for this. It was in Lafayette, Indiana. It was one of the lowest performing freestanders in the chain.
Oh.
Never been consistently profitable before. And so they wanted to bring somebody in who, I mean, I had hardly made any money in my life, so whatever I was going to make there was
better than $300 a month.
Yeah, exactly. It was going to seem all right. They knew I wanted to be in Minnesota. Like, this could be a really good proving ground for me to show that when Chick-fil-A opens in Minnesota, like, maybe I could be one of those guys that helps open a restaurant there. And so, believe it or not, I was selected right out of the interim manager class to be an operator. So I never had an interim manager assignment anywhere. And I started as an operator in December of 2009.
Okay.
So this is a month before I thought I was even going to go through the interim manager training.
Everything gets compressed into this very quick jump.
Yes.
Okay, so then you go to Indiana.
So I'm in Indiana. Yeah, Jennifer and I, and AJ, our oldest son, our only son at that time, he was born 2 weeks before we moved to Indiana.
Into this low... All right, well, I want to come back to that.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, like, keep moving here. I want to keep hearing how this goes, because I get really excited, because here we are in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Right.
And you have a great store. And so keep catching us up to how... Because I bet we could just talk forever about, you get into a low-performing store.
Yep.
You're the new guy.
Yep.
What was that like? I don't know. Should we talk about that?
Oh man, I could talk about this for hours. I'll try to condense this a little bit. I mean, I learned some things being in Brad's restaurant. I learned a lot of things being there. I learned a lot more once I became an operator, and it was really all my responsibility. I made a lot of dumb decisions over time that I learned from, that I think I still benefit from the learning today. There were some things that ended up going well too. It went from a $1.7 million restaurant to about a $3.5 million restaurant in 5 years. So that time period that I was there.
What are some of the levers you had to pull in order to change that trajectory? Like, what? And I'm assuming it's staffing and culture and advertising and everything, or what?
Yeah, it was. We were crazy. We did some really crazy things. So part of the deal with this restaurant, one of the reasons it was not doing well, is the actual accessibility to it. Like, it was very hard to get to it from the highway. And so we knew that if we're going to grow sales here, we have to teach Lafayette how to get to our restaurant, because it's not, I could go into the details and specifics of how hard it was, but just trust me, it was really, really hard to actually figure out how to get into our parking lot. And so how are we going to teach people to get into our parking lot? Well, we're going to have to incentivize them somehow, and it's going to be with free food. We gave away a lot of free food. So here's the deal. If we could pair giving away free food with an incredible customer experience, we knew that people were going to come back.
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A's talked for a long time about the 4 unique marketing assets that we have. I haven't heard these all that recently, actually, but we used to talk about these a lot. We talked about food. So if we can give away our food, that's awesome. Cows. Nobody else has the cows. They're a really unique, fun marketing tool. People. So if we can get our customers to interact with our people while we're doing marketing, that's a win. And then influence, which sometimes I interchange that with the word community. Just how are we involved in the community? How are we impacting people even outside of our restaurant? And so we pulled all those 4 levers as often as we could. So if somebody would say, hey, like, can you guys put a sign up at our football stadium, pay only $500 for the football season? I would say, no, we're not really interested in putting our sign up here, but we are interested in being a part of football this year. Can we feed your team for free?
That's cool. Yeah.
We'd love to do that. Can we bring the cow to some games? Can we throw out mini cows into the crowd during the games? And so we would start. You think about it, like, we're leveraging all 4 of those levers when we're doing that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
People, the cows.
Yeah. Food, influence.
And influence.
Yeah.
Yeah. I watched that bar rescue guy once. He was coaching a restaurant that was just failing.
Yeah.
And he said, give away food. Like, that's the best way. you only pay it if they come in,
Yep.
and even there, then they're probably going to come back. And that's what he said. He had some flagging thing where if you were new, you got a different color napkin, and it was all about if you can just make them love the experience, that's going to be the best marketing.
That's so good.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yep.
So you kind of pulled all those. You training these people to come into your parking lot so they can actually see it.
Yep.
What else? Tell me more.
Yep. So, I mean, one of my favorite memories, maybe my team would like to forget it, but like I said, we did all kinds of crazy stuff. We did like remote, this was a town of like 60,000 people. And so it had its own radio station, like a country western station was the most listened to station in town. So we invited them out to do like a remote broadcast. And so all of the DJs were there, they're broadcasting their country western from our restaurant. And they just, I mean, when they told Lafayette where they were going to be, people just showed up.
Really?
Oh yeah.
That's
and then
cool.
we paired that with free food. So we said, if you tell us that you listen to this radio station, we're going to give you a free Chick-fil-A sandwich today.
That's cool.
But anyway, the one that was probably my favorite was we called it Families Eat Free Day. And literally we said, if you come in together as a family, everybody eats for free.
Wow.
Not just a sandwich. Like everybody gets a meal. We literally, what did we do? Let's see. Our sales I should say it this way. We gave away 6 times more food that day than we would have normally sold in a given day. Like we had 6 times the traffic to our restaurant that day. And we had so many people that tried Chick-fil-A for the very first time. It was an operational nightmare is too strong, challenge is too soft.
Because how much were they making good chicken and doing it on time and like positive?
There were definitely times where it took too long to get people the food. I mean, the food was good. I think the people were nice. We just weren't ready for that massive influx.
Nothing. I love when Gordon Ramsay or those other stores that come into a restaurant and it's like, all right, let's stress test her. Like a busy dinner rush is gonna exploit or show all of your failures.
Yeah, that's exactly
very
right.
quickly.
Yes, it will.
That's cool. Yeah. All right. So how long were you in Indiana for?
5.5 years.
Holy smokes.
Yep.
You were in Indiana for 5.5 years.
Yeah,
you had a bunch of kids there then. Too.
Yeah. So our second born Jameson was born there, and then Aubrey was born there, and then Gabriel was almost born there. He was born 2 weeks after we moved to Minnesota.
Okay.
So I moved to Lafayette. We moved to Lafayette in December of 2009. The first Chick-fil-A restaurants opened in Minnesota in fall of 2013.
Okay.
I was not selected to be a part of that. So there were 4 restaurants that opened right around the same time across the Twin Cities.
Now, when you're in Lafayette though, you were owning, that was your store? Mm-hmm. So the equivalent of what you have now.
Yeah.
At Lafayette. Okay, cool.
That's correct. Yeah, so that was my restaurant. But if you want to relocate, you have to go through the interview process. It's pretty rigorous. You got to prove yourself that you've got what it takes to.
Because you got family up here.
Yep.
There's a lot of reasons why you want to.
Yes, we always wanted to be back to Minnesota, and I think the right people in Chick-fil-A knew that, and I think I communicated that respectfully and not too pushy, but in a way that they knew that's where I wanted to be. And so I really wanted to be in that first round of Chick-fil-A operators that came to Minnesota. And I didn't get selected for it. And it was a really, really hard season of time, actually, where, I'll tell you, 2012 was the hardest year, probably the hardest year I've ever had as a Chick-fil-A operator, where basically my entire kitchen staff walked out one day at the beginning of that year. Yeah.
Why?
I won't get into the details too much. There was just some there were some paperwork issues.
Gotcha.
Maybe you could say that it came up and I tried to handle
2012 was that when Chipotle went through some changes too?
They did that later on. But yeah, for us it wasn't anything like the government flagged, but it was like I found out some stuff and I tried to be super respectful to everybody, and I sat down and had face-to-face conversations. And everybody just decided to leave, and I get that. I understand. But it set off this just kind of firestorm of issues that started to rise operationally in the business, where I moved all of the best people that I had from the front of house and put them in the back of house, because at least they sort of knew what a chicken sandwich was supposed to look like, but they had no idea what they were doing back there. And then I hired new people for the front of house, and I hired some really, really bad people. And it was just, I mean, our food was not good. The speed was terrible. Like the people were not nice on the front counter. I see my customer experience scores start to tank. And pretty soon after that, my sales started to decline. Really? It was the only time I'd ever seen a sales decrease in any year that I've been a Chick-fil-A operator. And then, like, my profits start going into the red. And so, I mean, you can imagine, like, I'm coming home, and Jennifer, my wife, she asks me every month at the end of the month, like, hey, how was this month? Like, how much money do we make? And I'm telling her, like, we didn't make any money. I actually owe money back to Chick-fil-A.
That's the thing. Business ownership. Those of us that are business owners will often, kind of, you don't know what it's like to feed mouths and them. But that dynamic you just said there, is that responsibility is incredibly hard, and it's part of why you have to have the upside. Like, if I'm willing to go into it and lose everything, then, like, we got to be able to have upside to it.
That's right.
That's a challenge. I didn't know that. So that was for, like, kind of a full year type. That
was a full year. So I remember. I have a business consultant that Chick-fil-A provides. They're not my boss. They truly are a consultant, somebody who comes along and just says, hey, how can I help you with the business?
Did you try turning it on and off?
yeah, exactly. But I remember the conversation with my business consultant where I finally just realized the day before he was going to come, I can't fudge these numbers anymore to make them look good. Like, there's nothing positive I can take from this. It used to be, you could kind of say, like, our speed of service isn't very good, but, like, at least we're running good food cost or something. And I shouldn't use the term fudge the numbers, because there was nothing I was doing to kind of fudge anything. But
you were looking on the bright side of something. There was glimmers of okayness in this. Yes,
exactly.
Okay.
And there was none of that anymore. There was nothing I could hide behind that was positive. And so I remember just saying, listen, I'm really struggling. I need some help. And what I specifically asked for was, could Chick-fil-A change my salary structure for a period of time? I'm not, typically I'm paid off of a portion of our profits. When you're not making any profits and you're owing money back to Chick-fil-A, like, there are only a few more months that I could have done this. And I said, could you change my salary? Could you actually put me on a stable salary, essentially, which is very uncommon in the Chick-fil-A world. And my business consultant went to his boss, which happened to be Bruce Cameron. I already mentioned Bruce.
Oh, wow.
And I think by God's grace, they said yes, like, they would do that for me. And I remember my business consultant saying, we'll do this for you. But if we have to have the same conversation in December, this was May, if we have to have the same conversation in December, it might have a different outcome. And I'm pretty sure he meant, like, I'm going to lose my job.
Oh, for sure.
And so I felt some serious pressure. I mean, I felt the weight of this whole thing. Like,
yeah, I was going to say, now you seem like a positive guy.
Yeah.
Like, we've had situations that we've talked about that are deeply challenging. And I've heard you kind of struggle with things, but it's, I always would classify you as somebody, you got big shoulders. Like, all right, load them up. Let's do this. How were you feeling through all that?
Yeah. Oh, man. I mean, I remember writing down in my journal, like, God, I still believe you're there, but it feels like you don't care. And, I mean, every day was just a struggle to get through. I mean, I was working 80 hours a week at that point, mostly working in the kitchen, just trying to keep the operation afloat. And then I've got the burden of how am I going to hire more people? How do I get the right people in? I don't have anybody to do the paperwork for me. I've got to do it. I'm terrible with those details. Like, I got to do that, and I've got to answer emails, and I've got to do the payroll. And there's just, I mean, any small business owner listening, like, understands that. It piles up. But it was just a massive weight that I don't know if I could have borne if it wasn't for Chick-fil-A taking some of the weight off my shoulders. So when my salary structure changed, Chick-fil-A essentially said, doesn't really matter if you're not turning a profit right now. Like, you do what you need to do to get the restaurant back on track.
Was there acknowledgement of this moment, this decision that had to be made was the right decision, and that there was a little bit of stuff that got flung in your lap? Or was it more of like, Andrew has had some shortcomings in this period? Like,
yeah, I mean, I think it was some of both.
Okay.
There was nobody at Chick-fil-A that said, like, here are your specific shortcomings. But the fact that my business consultant said, like, we might have a different outcome in October, or in December, means that they didn't have total faith in me that, like, you know, I was the right guy.
Well, and what I've found is it's like you may have these moments that are outside of your control, but I think it's Henry Cloud talks about in his book Integrity that, like, the more integrity you have, the more weight you can bear.
Yeah.
And when you don't have and we all have these shortcomings. Like, there's just, I may not be good at spinning these 15 different basketballs and doing X, Y, Z.
Right.
And whoever it is that's running my business needs to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so it's not just integrity thing. I mean, integrity and execution and people and all that.
Yeah.
So then when those things happen, it's like, it's because I've dropped the ball in all these little areas. It's almost like when people are like, oh, you lost the basketball game at the very last minute because you let the ball loose. It's like, no,
there's so many opportunities.
We had the ball 1,000 times up into this point.
Yeah.
So you're saying you felt a little bit of both.
Yeah, I think so. Your point reminds me a little bit of, I hope I get this right. I'm going to paraphrase. I think it's a Mark Twain quote where he says, if you're honest in everything, you don't have to remember everything.
Yeah.
And that's just the idea of, the more integrity you have, I think the more you can just shoulder. Like, you don't have to worry about trying to cover your tracks and make sure that you're, you know, everything is sort of still all in line. So
you're in the back making sandwiches.
I'm in
Pressure's
the back.
on.
Yep.
You got to do all this stuff, payroll and everything.
Yep.
And make chicken.
So here's what I did. Again, Chick-fil-A was incredibly gracious. It didn't really matter how much money I made or didn't make over these next, 8 months or so. It was just, can you get your business turned around? Can you get your operation turned around? And so I said, we're going to dedicate 120 hours a week. Pretty sure it was a week to training. Like, literally, I got a number of different people that were my trainers, and they said, we're going to train, obviously, all the new employees, but we're going to do a recalibration on basically everything with everybody. And we just dove into the details and the specifics of all the things that needed to happen in the operation to make the sandwich great, to make the service awesome, for it to be fast and accurate. And lo and behold, I mean, it was by about September or October, like, the flywheel starts to turn a little bit and things are getting better. Our customers are telling us, it seems like the service is better here. And our sales are starting to nudge up a little bit. And we're still not making any money at that point. But by the time we got to November, December, we're making a little bit of money again. And I don't even have to have a follow-up conversation with my business consultant anymore. It's like, well, January, the agreement was, I'm going to go back to kind of the normal pay structure. And I did, and we made money out of the restaurant, and things started going pretty well in that season of time.
Wow. That's pretty cool that the organization would come alongside you and help you. It seems like there's really a shoulder-to-shoulder relationship that Chick-fil-A has with its operators.
Yeah, it's really, really pretty special, actually. There's a phrase that we use internally that you're in business for yourself, but never by yourself. And the idea is that there's so many resources out there that Chick-fil-A has. There's a business consultant, there's a financial consultant, there's a marketing consultant, there's a throughput consultant, a production throughput consultant, a customer throughput consultant. They're experts, specialists in all different areas of the business. And they almost never reach out to me unless I reach out to them.
Okay. So they're not like a central. I always laughed at being at Best Buy, right?
Yeah.
There were these district teams that
Right.
would just come around and like poke things.
Right.
And some of them, like, I had one of my managers that was one of my best leaders. He reminds me a lot of you, actually, Chad McDermott. Fantastic man. He was my general manager very early on at Best Buy, and he did a very good job of it. I'm going to come in and I just want to, like, acknowledge you and support you
Yeah.
and pour into you and how can I help you.
Yep.
He would ask hard questions, but it was more helpful.
Yeah.
And he percolated to the top very quickly.
Yep.
Whereas the other guys you could come and they kind of just, how do I make myself look good? And
Yes.
it was like all the turds rolled down the shingles. Like there was never like a, hey, how do I help bring you up a level? It was always goofy, but that's cool to hear. So, so you get to turn around, you start making some money, and then you're like, that's it. I'm leaving. I'm going to Minnesota.
Well, I wanted to go to Minnesota in 2013, but my recent historical performance from 2012 was pretty bad. And I didn't have much ground to stand on to tell Chick-fil-A, hey, I'm qualified. I'm ready to do this. I'm your guy. I applied and I tried, but I was turned down for that opportunity. They told me the answer is no, not yet. It's not no forever. You can never get there. You're not going to be in this first round of restaurants.
Have you ever felt like there's a manipulation going on? Do other people feel like there's you kind of tell all the operators that when they get turned down or what's that like?
Man, it's been a while since I've been in the interview process. I've never felt that way before. I think it's easy. It can be easy to feel that way sometimes when you're the one who gets told no. Mm-hmm. You want to start pointing fingers at everybody else or blaming others, and I think I've seen some people do that, but I've never felt that way myself.
That's cool.
Yeah. So 2013, I get the no, and so I mean, you can imagine I have to go home and tell my wife, we're not good. This is our dream. Like, we're not going back to Minnesota. And so, like, I told her. I remember that night. I went home and I told her. And the next night was our date night, our weekly date night. And I took her out to the nicest steakhouse in town. And over dinner,
Arby's. No.
Yeah, Arby's. Yeah, it was delicious. It was a place called Mountain Jack's in Lafayette, and we sat down and we laid out our goals for the next 2 years. And we said, God has us here for a purpose. I don't know what it is. We don't even really want to be here. But there's a reason that we're here. And we could just sort of sulk and, think everybody should be sorry for us for the next 2 years. Or we could just try to pour ourselves into where God has us right now. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we did. We wrote out goals for our marriage. We wrote out goals for our parenting, and then goals for the business. And man, I'll tell you, those are a really sweet 2 years, actually. Those are really amazing. When we started, we were always going to a church, but we actually invested ourselves more in the church. Mm-hmm. And we started making deeper friendships. We started acting like we're going to be here for a while. This wasn't just like, it's sort of a short-term stop and we're not going to be here. Like, we invested ourselves in relationships into the church, started making long-term business decisions for our Chick-fil-A restaurant. It wasn't like, I'm in the interview process, so I'm not going to buy this, this thing and make my P&L look bad. It's, if this is going to be what's best for our customers and best for the long-term outlook of our business, we're just going to make that investment.
Interesting.
Let's do it.
That's interesting. We hear about, big businesses in corporate America or Wall Street, right? They're always making short-term gains to try and make the earnings report look better. But so it sounds like you decided, let's be the most excellent long-term steward of what we have right now. That's it. And keep it
absolutely
going.
Right. And it wasn't long after that. It was 2015. I was selected to be an operator in Burnsville.
That's cool. Yeah. That's cool. And so here you are. And you've been doing this for how many years? 2015? It is.
Yeah. I mean, we're at like 7.5 years now in Burnsville.
So now I think it's been fun to listen about the growth you've had, right? So you come into a new market. Chick-fil-A was relatively unheard of. You were in the Burnsville store. There is an Apple Valley store that came before you. And, it's been funny to watch people. I remember our first trip to Apple Valley. I was like, hey, I've heard of this through the Christian grapevine and all the leadership talks. Of, whatever it is. And I remember our first try we went there. I was like, well, it's good. I don't know. It's not like that special. It was, it was good. I don't know. The people were clean. It was they were nice and they were friendly and they were super clean cut and just like really okay. It was good, but we'll watch and we'll see how it degrades over time.
Sure.
Or whatever.
Yep.
But it just constantly, it seemed like it would, for the most part, move upward and
Yeah,
forward. And
that's
then,
right.
and then the Burnsville store opened, which
Yep.
would be about 10 minutes away type of deal
Yep.
through the suburbs. And so you were the one that launched that, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And so talk to us about, what are the tensions there? Talk to us about the growth, like because I think it's hard when you're in a brand new store, I'd imagine. There's some expectations set, but of course you're going to grow.
Yeah.
And so walk us through what it's been like on the ship right now.
Yeah, it's been a blast. It really has been full of challenge and full of joy and some success through it. I think it's been really, really pretty cool. 2017 through 2021, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 5 years, we saw at least 18% sales growth year over year.
Wow.
For 5 years in a row. And that's slowed down now, which I'm sorry to say. I really am excited to get that growth trajectory going up and to the right again. But we've had some significant growth over time, which means obviously as sales grow, the amount of team members that you have grows, the amount of customers that you have grows, your level of influence grows. And I'm often nervous that my capacity is going to be is going to be what limits our business growth. I have to keep growing at least at the same rate, if not faster than my business is growing.
So talk to me a little bit about one of the first things I wanted to ask you about was you hire the same people that everybody else does to a degree, and you don't pay them a ton more than anybody else.
Sure.
If anything, I work with folks that do technical work, and boy, some of the hourly rates are incredibly high, right?
Yeah.
Talk to us about what's it like to find and get people. What's the secret sauce of a Chick-fil-A person and team? Because, and maybe I'll just say it because you probably won't, but I really feel like you guys genuinely deliver faster food that's better, cooked better, and for the most part, you guys have a better smile. It feels like you guys want to serve us.
Yeah.
And I think during COVID, we all saw what happened. Everybody else got into the doldrums. You guys stepped to
That's true.
Genuinely stepped to the plate. And I think America saw that.
Yep.
And all the memes you would see, now there may be a little Christianese inside of us. All of us churchgoers will be like, oh, let's go to Chick-fil-A because they're totally on our side. But I don't think that's what it was. You guys just delivered excellence, I think.
Sure.
And I think it's your people and your product and everything. But talk to us about, how do you get folks to do so well for maybe not that much pay, but good pay? In fact, you guys are doing a unit like college and stuff, but if they're not making $50 an hour,
right.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So the challenge is still getting them in the door. There's not a lot of people that have an ambition of working fast food, and less people who have an ambition of working fast food for a career. And so that's still the challenge. But once they're in the door, I'll tell you, I've been really influenced by Patrick Lencioni and a lot of his work.
Yep.
He talks about the difference between hard culture and soft culture. With hard culture, I'll start with soft culture, is all of kind of the ancillary stuff. It's the pay rate that you're at, or it's the health insurance that you get. Free food at Chick-fil-A, would be one of the benefits. Sometimes he makes jokes about some tech firm wants to put a slide from floor one to floor 2 to floor 1.
You can do your work in a hammock, bro.
Right, exactly. Nap rooms and things like that. Those are all soft culture things, and soft culture is not bad. It's actually really good to have a strong soft culture. But hard culture is really what keeps people around. That is the true everyday experience that a team member or an employee has at that organization. So things like, do my leaders care about me? Do they smile at me? Do my teammates welcome me when I come in the door? Do my leaders know that, what my ambitions are? Do they know what my goals and dreams are? Are they helping me to get there? Am I hearing the same thing from my leadership team, or is one leader telling me this and another leader telling me that? If we can align all those things and try to create the best hard culture possible, we're going to keep a lot of the best people around. And that's really, that's something we've put a lot of focus on.
So you've mentioned often that you have a leadership team. Talk to me about the structure of your leadership team. What are the things that they take ownership, and talk to me about how you nurture that, and then how do they do what you just described?
Yeah, there are. It's an incredible group of people. You know, I was almost hesitating when I was saying getting them in the door is the hard part. Like, that is true, but sometimes I look at the team and I think, how did I get these incredible people to come work at my restaurant? Like, this is a fast food restaurant in Minnesota. Like, it's not that special. And yet they're attracted for some reason to working at this particular location, and they're amazing. And so there's me at the top of the organizational chart, and then there's James. So James is my executive director, and he is always the smartest person in the room. Like, he's got this incredible, I don't know how he is. He's the smartest, and he's the hardest worker. Like, he is just,
that's cool,
kind of the total package. He's very good. If you're familiar with Working Genius, from Patrick Lencioni, he is a D. He's a discerner. He's got this ability to see the future. Not in like a weird way, but like, he can just sort of predict what's going to happen. He can put all of the little pieces together, and he goes, yeah, like, if we make this decision, I'm pretty sure that this is going to be the outcome. And he's been such a great, just a guide by my side through this whole, restaurant journey.
How long have you had him on your team?
Man, it's got to be close to 5 years.
That's cool.
Now. Yeah, it's been really awesome. So James oversees then our director team, and our directors are in charge of a number of things. I've got operational directors, I've got somebody who oversees leadership development, I've got somebody who oversees training. So there's different parts of the business that they oversee. If I'm being honest, in this season of time, the directors have been working a lot of operational hours. They've been doing less of the leadership development that they want to be doing. And they've been doing less of their job and more of sort of the job that they have to do to make things work. We don't have enough staff right now. And so they've been working very, very hard.
That's tough. You know, my brother worked at a Pizza Hut, and that Pizza Hut, he was the quote unquote general manager.
Yeah.
And the way the regional managers would resource them, it was really, Mike was the fallback.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was at Perkins, to a degree, it's like, well, you don't have the labor budget, but you can work 60 hours this week.
Right.
And you're like, this is like the fourth week in a row. Like,
yes.
And so, but there's a time, you know, again, as a business owner, I always laugh like, yep, I got to suck it up, Buttercup. Yep. There's a time for it. And
you'll never hear me say that to my leaders.
I'm much more, that's to me. Let me be clear.
Yeah. No, you can say, sometimes you say that to yourself. And there are even times where I've had conversations with my wife, just say like, this is going to be a hard season of time. And if your life is a hard season of time, like, you're probably not doing the right job. You know, you need to find something else. But it is appropriate to have seasons of time. I think
it's time where you got to clean the grease.
Yeah.
I always love when I think that's the hardest job at a restaurant. Is the two things are like the one when you got to clean the grease and you got to replace the grease, and the bringing that out in the back.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh my gosh! Right. Like,
did you guys have the fat vat?
It was disgusting. I never had to do it much. I saw it done more, and then when it was time to spray everything down and absolutely deep clean the whole thing. Yep. And which, whatever, I could make comments there, but that there's hard work. You get greasy. You got to do stuff.
Yeah, I liken this group of 5 directors that I have to my offensive line. You know, I'm the quarterback. They're the offensive line. They are doing all of the blocking for me right now, so that my time is freed up to do the things that only I can do. And even sometimes the things that I like to do, you know, even in a harder season of time. But they've been working a lot of hours in the operation.
What a blessing. I just pray, God, I hope that those folks will just feel a lift of joy in this moment, and that things will continue to move upward and forward. And part of this is because you guys, just like everybody else, are struggling to continue to find a great stream of people. You're always looking for great people. Is that what it is?
And it actually feels like it's getting better. It's not maybe as hard as it was even 2 or 3 months ago, but it's still finding, I mean, you can't just hire anybody off the street. Right. We're still very selective.
Talk to me about that. Talk to me about what does it mean for you guys to be selective, and what are you looking for, and how does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's always character first. That's the way it's.
And what does that mean? So I think some people go, "Well, be a good person." Like, what goes into the character that you're looking for at a Chick-fil-A team member?
I mean, I'll tell you specifically what that means to me, and I'll even tell you like what some of the ways that I filter that out in an interview. So I'm looking for somebody that is going to work with integrity, somebody who's going to be honest in all their dealings, somebody who's going to work hard, somebody who's going to have a strong work ethic. Like that's kind of that character piece that I'm looking for. That's really, really hard to teach somebody. So in the interview, I'll ask them actually about future ambition. You know, I'll ask, where do you see yourself 10 years from now? I'll even ask like a 14-year-old that. Where do you see yourself 10 years from now? And I care less about what the answer is. I care more about that they have some sort of future ambition that they're going after, right? I'll ask, like, what's the most important thing in the whole world to you? Just gives me an idea of what they value. And most people will say family, and that's a great answer. But I want to know they value something more than just kind of themselves, right? I'll ask, do you volunteer somewhere? On the work ethic side.
That's an interesting question. Do you volunteer somewhere? Mm-hmm. What percentage of your people you feel like have a strong answer to that?
Not as many as you'd like. So it's not a deal breaker question. You know, it's like, oh, you don't volunteer, you know, you're out of here. Like we don't, you know, it's not that.
But does it help you find the shining light?
Absolutely.
Like, to me, I think that type of a question that's interesting. That's a good question.
Yeah. Yep. On the work ethic side, James came up with something pretty interesting. I think it's pretty brilliant, actually. So he pulls out the game Perfection. Have you ever seen the game Perfection? It's that game where it's got the little yellow pieces that are different shapes, and you have to fit them into the slots. And there's probably 24 of them or something like that. Okay. And you got there's like a crescent moon, and there's a star, and there's a square, and there's a circle. You got to,
does it pop at the end?
Yeah, and it pops at the end. Yep. And there's a pretty direct correlation between how quickly somebody can match these pieces and how quickly they can look at a screen that has an order on it and like organize these thoughts and get food on a tray.
Dude, you know what's funny? When I hired my last guy, Brady, who is fantastic.
Yeah.
Young, he's 19.
Yeah.
I was like, how old are you again? He's like, I'm like, are you 21? And how old are you? He's like, no, I'm 19. I'm like, it's just been, you work with younger people all the time. I don't. And, when I was interviewing him, I actually wanted to know if he was a gamer, which sounds ridiculous. Sure. But when you're doing UI, UX, you're problem solving in software, like I actually want gamers because they know how to problem solve that. But that's interesting. So perfection, if you want to be able to look up at a screen and come back and like, oh man, I bet. Because the ticking time bomb is coming.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. We value speed. And so I actually look at, as they're walking to the interview table or walking away from the interview table, are they sort of plodding along like they don't care, or are they walking with a purpose?
So how'd you find anybody in the South that moved? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing.
Come on.
All my people that I love down South.
They make up for it with a smile on their face.
Yes, they do. It's funny. My dad's, in construction and everything. And up here in Minnesota, we got that doggone winter that shows up and just has to quicken you just a little bit. Yep. You're not going to walk slow if it's 20 below outside. No. You got to boogie and then not fall because you're going to slip on the ice. Yeah. But that's cool. So do you guys actually have them play Perfection in front of you?
Yeah.
Dude. So how many people have you watched play Perfection in front of you? Or has your team watched?
Oh, man. I mean, probably in the 100 range. Seriously? I don't know. Yeah.
That's funny. Do you tell them what's happening? Or do you just
I mean, no, we don't tell them why they're doing it, but we explain the rules. Yeah.
That's funny. And then we're watching for copious amounts of cursing because that's probably not going to work if you do that.
That's true. That's true.
Funny. Okay, so it was character, integrity, hard work,
honesty.
Yeah, that's cool. So those are the things you're looking for.
Those are the things I'm looking for.
How do you find the honesty thing? Like, how do you, in a conversation, in an interview, how does that come to light?
Yeah, I mean, I do try to pick out inconsistencies in their answers. And so there are actually some questions I can kind of set up just to try to look for that. I will look for, like on the integrity side, I will actually ask, the first question I'll ask is, what was your favorite thing about your previous job? That is only a setup for the next question, which is, what was your least favorite thing about your previous job? And I think probably half the people that I have this conversation with start talking about their old boss. And they start just tearing apart their boss and how bad of a leader they were and they didn't understand and this and that. And, well, there may be some truth to that. What's also true is they're going to be saying the same things about me here pretty soon. If they had a level of integrity, they would probably acknowledge that it was hard and they didn't think their boss did a great job, but they'd probably stop there and they'd probably own some of that themselves as well.
Yeah. That's interesting.
That's a deal breaker for me. If they're gonna rip their old boss too much, like, you're not gonna get a job on my team.
Mm-hmm. How when you interview somebody, how much of the debrief do you provide? It's always interesting.
Yeah.
I'm so close with people that I forget what it's like to have lots of interviews. Like, I'm so outside of corporate land right now.
Yeah, you mean like a debrief post interview, just to say like, here's how you did.
Listen, you complain about your boss all the time.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so I'm a little nervous on the legal side, to be honest, of like what I can say and I can't say.
Right.
And so I think this is okay to say, like, for the people that I see some real potential in that just didn't do it right.
Yeah.
I actually do take some time to say, hey, this part of the interview did not go very well. I'd love to talk to you again in 6 months. Here's what you need to work on.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I don't.
Yeah, you got to be careful. That's cool. That's cool.
Yep.
That's interesting. So then, why is it that while you guys, how do you do food faster? Like, tell me why?
Why do we do food
How
faster?
is it that your food continues, in my experience, to be fair, I think the McDonald's franchises around here produce pretty well.
Yeah.
Like our McDonald's, the 2 or 3 that we go to with our family of 6, they do a good job.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that you guys do a good job. There are other places, and I think COVID has gotten to this point where, like, if you didn't do a good job, you're not open right now. You're gone. Like,
maybe so.
But how is it that your team is able to perform well on speed through this whole thing?
Yeah. Are you familiar with the 4 disciplines of execution?
I think I read the cliff note of the book once. Why don't you fill me in?
You're like me. I remember it's like, I asked you if you read a book. You're like, yeah, I read like the first half of it, maybe.
Yeah. In 2005 sometime.
Yeah, I know. I'm a start things and not finish them kind of guy often. But the nice thing about this book is you read the first half of it and you've got everything you need from it. So it's really an incredible book. It's simply like a methodology on how to get things done.
Okay.
How to align your team in a way that everybody's moving in the same direction and people are actually getting real work done. And so we've implemented the 4 disciplines of execution into the culture of the restaurant. So every leader that we have, which is probably like 30 people, is making a commitment every single week saying, this is what I'm going to do to help move our speed of service forward. And then they're reporting back on their commitment that at our next week's meeting. They actually kind of get in trouble a little bit if they don't complete their commitment to help us move forward. So we've determined our WIG, our wildly important goal. So that's discipline number 1. What's our wildly important goal? What's the thing that is the most important thing right now? Like, if we work on this, it's going to have the biggest splash in our business.
What's an example of that right now?
Speed of service.
Speed of service.
That's what we're working on. So it's interesting that you're asking me about that. Our speed has only gotten better over the last 9 months as we've been working on, like, this has been our WIG.
What are things that pop up that cause, now I think I know some things, but what makes service go slow on a 3-hour shift? Like, how does that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many elements to it. I mean, you just think about kind of the flow of food, right? So you have to have enough product on hand.
Yep.
Enough has to be cooked. In a timely manner.
Yep.
Like your team members have to be trained properly to be able to get it out right. They have to
eliminate mistakes, I'd imagine.
Yeah, eliminate mistakes. Yep.
Stay organized at the end.
Yeah, your technology has to work to kind of tell you what orders are coming. You have to bag the food correctly. You have to repeat the order to the customer.
So there's lots of little things. But that repeat to order seems like that's kind of a pretty crucial thing.
Yeah.
Whenever I've gotten a bag of the wrong food, I'm like, I bet the whole line behind me just went, like this gigantic, what do you call it, the train of events.
Yeah,
like
right,
this
right,
just
yes.
screwed everything else up.
Yes, there's a
Because
chain
now I don't have my right
reaction,
one, they don't have the right one, they don't have the right one.
Yep.
And well, that's cool. So speed just in general is a wig that you guys pull on. And
Yep.
now you're watching that metric often.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
the little comments that I've had with you, like, hey, I went through your restaurant and it was good, and you're like, you knew the time, like you're on top
Sure.
of that.
Yeah.
That's a metric. What other things are you keep telling me more?
Well, so speed of service is the wig, right? And so I'm very dialed in with what our speed of service is right now. One of the disciplines of execution is to have a scoreboard. And so we actually go over our scoreboard every single week and look at like, where are we at with speed of service? Chick-fil-A provides us with an awesome app that is just for internal use. But as an operator, my leaders have this that has more data than I know what to do with. Like it's got sales on there. It's, broken down into month to date or year to date or week to date or daily sales or hourly sales. You can look at your speed of service. You can look at your productivity or your sales per labor hour on there. There's more stuff.
Cool. So your team can access that on their phones kind of whenever they want and make sure that they're checking stuff out. That's cool.
Exactly.
Okay. So you guys are pretty on point. You got numbers you're watching, and talk to me about when it's not really going well. Like how much I'm so bad. I played football.
Yeah.
I played sports. Like I have this tendency to like, come on, let's go, like bark and I've noticed not everybody responds to that. When it's going slow and you're behind, and some of the biggest nightmares I've actually had, real nightmares of, it was when I was at Perkins. I would have nightmares that I forgot the chicken tender melt is what it was, because it would take 9 minutes to make, and I'm like, oh, where's the chicken? Then be like, I forgot to put it down. But like, how does your team react in those moments to help it move better?
Yeah,
you just hope it ends.
That's such a good question. So there's a lot of thoughts that I have here. One of the more difficult decisions that I have to make on probably a weekly basis is, how do I handle that moment where I walk into the restaurant and things are not going the way that I want them to?
Dude, that used to, both restaurants I've been on, owners here, and you're like,
yes,
everybody's in the back leaning, and you're totally slacking.
Right. And so how do I handle that? I've done both extremes. Like one extreme is you go, like, what the heck is going on here? And you just get mad, and you start talking to people trying to diagnose the problem. The other extreme is like, you just don't say anything and you sort of hope the problem goes away, And I've tried to come closer to the middle on that, where I try not to diagnose the issue in the moment. I try not to even show a lot of negative emotion in the moment. It's just, let me put my gloves on, let me put my hairnet on, and I'm just going to jump in and help. And I trust my team enough now that I won't even diagnose it with them unless I see a recurrence of that problem. I really do think that my leaders are strong enough to be able to diagnose that issue with their team and to be able to work so that issue doesn't recur.
That's hard. I think people can hear that. And when you're a manager in another business, there's a like, oh yeah, that's the right way to do it. But when it's like you walk in and you know that means, by the way, guys, like I didn't make much last month.
Right.
Like that's my money you're taking from me.
Yep.
There's like a thing that I don't think the general public can always feel.
And you can't communicate it like that either.
That's my sin. Let's be clear. That's the sinful side in me.
Right.
And I haven't had that, but like there's a like I think that not everybody realizes that I think you have to do or become the character where you don't have that reaction at all, which it sounds like that's what you've been able to do.
Yeah, I'm trying. I do think it is very appropriate to diagnose the issue afterwards. And so I'm not suggesting that you don't just assume that your leaders are going to do that. But I do think we're at a point where usually the leaders do that. And if I see a recurrence of a problem, then it's like, okay, we need to talk about this. Tell me about our system. Tell me about what's breaking down. I want to know so that we don't keep going through the same problem again.
Do you guys, it seems like you generally have good luck working with young people. I think a lot of people have seen like the movie Waiting or some of these where there's this culture in restaurants that it's like, they're screwing around, and it's really easy to be distracted, and you're having fun.
Yeah.
And to a degree, you got a bunch of teenagers that work there sometimes. Like, talk to me about, like, what are some of the things that you get to manage while that's happening? And I don't know, what's that like?
Yeah. I mean, there's a balance. There's a real balance between having fun and working hard, right? You want both of those things to happen at the same time. There is very little screwing around from a, like, not getting the job done perspective at my restaurant. I do think there's a lot of screwing around from a, like, let's have fun perspective. So
That's good.
I was taking an order on the front counter the other day, and I could hear my kitchen singing I'll Make a Man Out of You from Mulan. And they're like the most tone deaf people in the world. And I can just hear them. And the customer looks at me and she goes, they're having a lot of fun back there, aren't they? And I'm just shaking my head like, this is ridiculous, but they're having a great time.
That's good,
doing
though.
it. And so
That's good.
I did have to say, you guys keep singing. Just do it a little quieter.
That's
next
funny.
time.
And part of why I bring it up is I've been into, there is a local store, a very large retail chain.
Yeah.
That when I go in there, it seems as though, and I don't want to just criticize young people. I don't think that's what it is, but I'll go in there and they sell a lot of home goods.
Sure.
A lot of things, right? And everybody in there is like 1, 2, 3, not it.
Right.
They're all leaning.
Yep.
Everybody's too busy to help a customer,
Right.
and there's a lot of them.
Yep.
Like, I think it's terrible service.
Yep.
And when I get in there and I'm like, how can you not want to be better at your job? Like, it's just, I don't know if it's the Norwegian in me and my dad, like, there's this, you're going to be bad at this job, huh? That's what you're going to do. You're not even having fun. You just stink at this. This is bad. But I do know that it's hard to, like, how do you keep the culture of now you guys have food. There's something going on, right? I think these guys are like, they're standing there and it's quiet on a Thursday afternoon in this store.
Right.
But it's ugly here.
It is all driven by leadership. If I'll tell you, if James wasn't a part of my team, there wouldn't be as much hard work that happens at my restaurant. He's just driven that, to his credit. There used to be a phrase that he would use back in the kitchen, and he would say, more work, less time. And it sort of became this rallying cry for them. They just go, more work, less time, and they would just bust it back there.
That's fun.
Yeah.
That's fun. So it sounds like you invest, if I were to take a step back, you invest heavily into your leaders.
Yep.
You guys keep it pretty simple. You're trying to make chicken sandwiches. You're trying to make sure they're done quickly. The food quality is good. The customer service. What are some of the monkeys that are on your back? Or are there any big issues that pop up, to kind of put a cap on some of this stuff? Or like, what are the biggest things you have to wrestle with? Besides the fact that if you don't make any money, you lose everything. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest issues are almost always people issues. There was one about a year ago or so that it was just, it was just crushing for me. Like, it was somebody I cared about significantly, and things just kind of kept going downhill, and it was becoming clear, like, this isn't going to work out long term. And gosh, for us to just kind of keep going back and forth in these conversations of like, hey, this isn't going to work, is just, that's brutal. Like, if you're a good leader, you care about people, right? And
Yep.
I don't know.
That's a good statement. That's such a simple but important thing. If you're a good leader, you care about people. That's good.
There's no substitute for caring for people, and I've learned that over time. Like, back in 2012, the worst year I ever had in business, my mindset shifted significantly from, I really thought, I did have a bunch of people leave for one reason, but I really, like, my approach or my thought process up to that point was, they work for me, right? Their job is to serve me. And I know that almost sounds kind of stupid, like, because we know what the good leader's supposed to say, but like, that was actually my mentality. And it shifted when I started working on the fryer, 80 hours a week. And I'm trying, like, it really is, my job is to serve them. And I realized, like, that was a very significant shift in mindset for me. And I've learned that you get found out pretty quickly if you just care about yourself. Yeah. You were talking about the guy at Best Buy. Mm-hmm. The differentiator is, like, he cared about you, right?
Yep.
And he made his way up the ladder pretty quickly. If you just care about yourself, like, you're you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Andrew, we're gonna end this one. I got a couple more other questions. We're gonna have a couple more episodes that we'll throw on here.
Sure.
But thank you so much. That's fun to hear the initial journey. We'll have some more questions, but
Yeah.
I totally appreciate it. So
Well, it's my pleasure.